Become a member of this channel to watch early access videos and request novels by clicking on the Join button or by clicking on the membership link in the description.
Chapter 15 Future Leaders. The sound of leaves rustling in the morning breeze filled the air as sunlight filtered through the tall branches of the great forest. The training field buzzed with energy and enthusiasm as Linnea and Persina engaged in an intense sparring match. Their wooden swords clashed rhythmically, creating echoes that blended with the chirping of birds. Rigor, seated under the shade of a large tree beside Verdia, observed the match thoughtfully, his keen eyes picking up areas where both girls could improve. The duel carried a playful tone, yet it was clear they were taking it seriously. Linnea's aggressive attacks were swift and forceful, while Persina maintained a defensive stance, waiting patiently for an opportunity to counter. Linnea is faster than before, Rigor noted, his sharp gaze following the girl's movements. Verdia, sitting beside him with her chin resting on her hand, shifted her gaze between the training field and the clear blue sky above. She has spirit, she replied with a small smile. But she lacks patience. That's something Persina cleverly uses to her advantage. The two fell into a companionable silence, their focus drawn back to the sparring match. Rigor felt an unfamiliar, yet soothing calmness in Verdia's presence. She seemed more at ease in this moment, her usual enigmatic demeanor softened by the relaxed atmosphere. "Master," Rigor began, breaking the silence. "What stops me from simply stealing higher-level healing magic from Mealy's?" "Many have tried," Verdia said, her voice tinged with a touch of amusement. "But the Mealy's church is relentless. They don't just pursue the thief. They go after their friends and family. Even the strongest aren't safe. They'll hire assassins, as they did with me. Although I have my own particular enemy." Rigor fell silent, mulling over her words. Finally, he spoke, "So replacing the entire upper echelon of their leadership would be necessary?" Verdia gave a faint smile. "That would be the case." He exhaled deeply, his gaze drifting skyward. It's so complicated. I'll leave that for the future." Verdia chuckled softly, her laughter almost musical. "The world does have its share of complications, but it also holds wonders waiting to be discovered. There's so much to live for and countless memories to be made." She held up her staff, adorned with an enormous red magic stone. "This staff came from a red dragon my group and I killed when it attacked a village. Afterward, the village celebrated for 7 days and nights without pause. The atmosphere is something I'll never forget." She then touched a star-shaped pendant with 6 points hanging around her neck. "This was given to me when I helped a princess reclaim her throne. It's said to have been passed down through generations of her royal family. I stayed there for a time. That was 200 years ago, but I still vividly remember the gratitude of the servants and villagers for overthrowing the former ruler. Sometimes, changing a nation's leadership can lead to an entirely different future." Rigor looked at her with admiration. "You've truly lived a life full of adventure. But if you love traveling, exploring, and adventuring so much, why did you return to the forest? From the way you describe your adventures, I'm surprised you're not out wandering the world right now." Verdia tilted her head, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. Her gaze lingered on Linnea and Persina, now exchanging blows with greater intensity. "Even adventurers need a break sometimes, Rigor. A place to recharge, reflect, and decide their next steps. The forest is peaceful, and the elves welcome me kindly. But the truth is..." She paused, watching as Linnea landed a decisive strike, winning the duel. The girl raised her wooden sword triumphantly, her infectious joy evident as Persina folded her arms, already plotting her comeback. "The great forest can't hold me for long," Verdia finished with a nostalgic smile. "I've lived in many places, Rigor, among humans, demons, elves, even the beast tribes. I don't belong to any single place. I've always been a free spirit." Rigor stayed quiet, absorbing her words. He had always known Verdia was unlike anyone else he'd ever met, but hearing this so directly made him admire her even more. "And you've never thought of settling down?" he asked hesitantly. "Maybe getting married? Finding a place to call home?" Her answer came as a laugh, light and unrestrained, as she leaned toward him with a playful look in her eyes. "Are you trying to see if you have a chance with me, little rigger?" His face grew hot, and he averted his gaze, stammering, "It's not what I meant." "You're adorable when you're flustered," she teased, her laughter softening into a warmer tone. "To answer your question, I've never had that kind of luck. I've had a few unrequited loves, yes, but I've also turned down many suitors." "Like who?" Rigger asked, still struggling to shake off his embarrassment. "The sword god from 3 generations ago, for one," she said casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "But I found him far too arrogant, and it was the same with the others. There was never a time when both sides were interested at the same moment. And over time, I realized I might be destined to be alone." "Destined?" Rigger's tone was filled with curiosity. Verdia sighed, her gaze growing distant. "It seems that way. I've spent so much time wandering the world that I've lost any deep connections. Perhaps it was my choice. Perhaps it was fate. I'm not entirely sure. But the truth is I lost interest a long time ago." Rigger wanted to say something, but before he could find the right words, Linnea's voice called out from the training field. "Boss, Persina says my move was wrong, even though she lost." He stood, still reflecting on their conversation, and glanced at Verdia, who gestured encouragingly. "Go on. They're raw talent waiting to be refined. Do your job, trainer." At the training field, Linnea and Persina were panting, but still brimming with energy. Rigger grabbed a wooden sword and began guiding them, correcting Linnea's stance and showing Persina how to transition more quickly between defense and offense. "You're putting too much strength into your arms," he told Linnea. "Use more of your hips to generate power. Persina, your stance is solid, but you need to work on your timing. Wait for the right moment to counter." The two absorbed his instructions with focus, and Rigger couldn't help but admire their talent. Though young and immature in some ways, they pushed each other to grow and improve. As he trained them, his thoughts briefly wandered to the rest of the tribe and the changes his influence had brought. Reflecting on the promising younger generation, Rigger felt a surge of pride. They were the future he hoped to guide toward greatness. After the final round of training, Linnea and Persina huddled together, debating animatedly about who had performed better. Meanwhile, Rigger stepped away, only to be approached by one of the warriors. "Rigger," the warrior said, "the tribal leader, Gustav, wants to speak with you." With Verdia's words still lingering in his mind and the progress of his students fresh in his thoughts, Rigger made his way toward Gustav, ready to face whatever the future held. Upon arriving at Gustav's cabin, Rigger noticed the heavy atmosphere in the room. Gustav sat in his carved wooden chair, arms crossed over his broad chest. His intense gaze followed Rigger the moment he entered. "Rigger," Gustav began, his deep voice resonating in the small space. "Sit down. I want to talk." Without hesitation, Rigger took one of the rustic chairs in front of him. The young man noticed more than just seriousness in Gustav's expression. There was a hidden concern in his tone. "I've been watching you," Gustav said, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest. "Not just as a warrior, but as someone who is becoming increasingly important to our tribe. Your growth and strength is remarkable, as is your ability to teach and inspire the younger generation." Rigger tilted his head slightly, sensing there was more to the praise. "Thank you, Chief Gustav," he replied humbly. "But I know you won't stay in the great forest," Gustav continued, his tone shifting to something more solemn. "I want to talk to you about the future of our tribe." Rigger pondered what might have led to such seriousness. "For years, Guise has been the natural successor to the leadership role," Gustav explained, crossing his arms. "He is strong, courageous, and loyal. However, like his sister, he lacks the necessary qualities to lead the tribe as a whole." This statement took Rigger by surprise. He had always respected Guise, a model warrior, but it was true that the man had an impulsive nature. "Guise is impatient," Gustav elaborated, sensing Rigger's thoughts. "He acts too quickly, without considering the consequences of his decisions. A leader must see the bigger picture, understand not only immediate dangers, but also the long-term impact of their choices. And Guise lacks that vision." Rigger reflected on this, wondering where the conversation was heading. "That's why," Gustav continued, his eyes locking onto the young man, I've been considering other options. And who do you have in mind? Rigger asked, his brow furrowing. The heiresses of the Didoldia and Adoldia tribes, Linnea and Persina, Gustav said with a faint smile. They have something he doesn't, the ability to learn and grow. They're young and inexperienced, but full of potential. With the right training and guidance, they could become exemplary leaders. Rigger thought about these words. Linnea and Persina were undoubtedly talented and had the potential to become exceptional leaders. Do you think they're ready for this? Rigger asked, trying to understand Gustav's perspective better. Not now, Gustav admitted, shaking his head. They're still young and have much to learn. But the natural talent is there. That's why I plan to send them to study at the Renoa Magic Academy when they're older. There, they'll gain broader knowledge, refine their skills, and expand their horizons. Renoa. The name of the famous magic university echoed in Rigger's mind. He knew the place was renowned, not only for its magical teachings, but also for the wealth of knowledge it offered. And what about guys? Rigger asked carefully. Gustav sighed, a heavy expression crossing his face. He won't be happy, but I know he loves his daughter and wants the best for her. I have no doubt that, deep down, he'll understand that this is the best decision for the tribe. However, it will be my responsibility to deal with him when the time comes. The weight of leadership became clear to Rigger in that moment. Gustav wasn't just leading the tribe. He was carrying its hopes, fears, and internal struggles. And you, Rigger? Gustav asked, changing the subject. Have you thought about what you'll do when you leave the tribe? I have a few goals, Rigger admitted. That's good, Gustav advised with a faint smile. The world out there is vast and dangerous. You'll need to be ready for what lies ahead. Rigger nodded, thanking him for the conversation before standing and leaving the cabin. Rigger arrived home at the end of the day, still reflecting on his conversation with Gustav. Inside the cabin, his mother, Celine, was leaning over a table, writing a letter. His father, Hantar, was gesturing animatedly while speaking with Verdia, who listened with a faint smile and a closed book in hand. You're quiet today, Rigger, Hantar remarked, noticing his son's silence upon entering. Conversations about the future tend to do that, Rigger replied as he approached. How about a sparring match? Hantar laughed, slapping the table enthusiastically. Still trying to beat me without magic, boy? He stood and leapt toward the yard beside the house. Rigger grinned, cracking his knuckles in anticipation as he followed. Celine and Verdia paused their activities and stepped onto the porch to watch. Positioned at opposite ends of the yard, the duel began. Rigger used the swift strikes of the sword god style, trying to land a blow on his father, who countered with kicks and claw-like attacks from every angle. You're getting stronger, Rigger, Hunter said with a smile, spinning to deliver another blow. But you're still hesitating at critical moments. Maybe you're just getting old, Dad, Rigger teased, smoothly dodging the next attack. He took advantage of the opening to strike, but Hantar blocked with ease. Verdia, observing with interest, crossed her arms. So, what was the conversation with Gustav about? Rigger replied between attacks. Gustav wants Linnea and Persina to become the tribe's leaders. He plans to send them to Renoa in the future. Hantar chuckled, spinning and landing a sidekick that made Rigger stagger back. That's ambitious, but they have what it takes if trained well. Rigger straightened and attacked again, his movements now more calculated. I agree. They're talented and have strong personalities. I'll start teaching them some leadership skills. Good idea, Hantar said, blocking another attack. But leadership isn't something learned through words alone. It requires experience. Rigger stepped back, his eyes fixed on his father. Something changed in his stance. He seemed to be waiting for a moment, a single instance of weakness. When Hantar advanced again, Rigger sidestepped completely. Using his father's momentum against him, Rigger's sword stopped inches from Hantar's throat. The yard fell silent. Celine and Verdia watched in surprise as Hantar exhaled, standing up with a smile. Well, it seems the boy has finally done it, Hantar admitted, brushing the dust off his clothes. And when was the last time you lost control in a fight? Rigger grinned victoriously. I knew it would happen sooner or later. He continued, about control, it's been a while since I fought a life-or-death battle with a tough opponent. Maybe that's dulling my senses. I feel stuck at the advanced level. Could that be the reason? Perhaps. If this persists, ask Fendrell. He might know something about it, Hantar advised. His mother and Verdia congratulated him warmly. As night fell, Rigger thought about the challenges that still awaited him in the great forest. Life expectancy of the beast race. I'm uncertain about this, as there's no mention in the canon, and the given information is contradictory. On Reddit, opinions are divided, so I've decided to hold a poll. Anyone interested can participate via this. Chapter 16 Path of the Great Warriors. Rigger stood before a broad, empty space in the clearing, surrounded by shattered stones and patches of earth scattered with small craters. This clearing served as his testing ground, a place where he could experiment freely without worrying about damaging the village or endangering its residents. Yet, even here, the dangers of his practices were ever present. He was about to test a new concept he'd been developing: vacuum magic. If I can control the pressure and create a stable area, he murmured, focusing mana into his hands. The concept involved creating a space devoid of air, generating a vacuum field. With this, he hoped to recreate techniques similar to Danzo Shimura's vacuum abilities and amplify his fire explosions. He channeled mana in a specific pattern, attempting to mold the magic with precision, or at least trying to. The required level of control was far beyond what he anticipated. The result was catastrophic. The unstable magic compressed into a singularity before violently exploding. Rigger felt the imminent danger of death, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. His body reacted instinctively, using Flash Step to dart out of the danger zone. A shockwave erupted in one direction, while a sharp, blade-like rift of compressed air shot in the opposite direction, striking one of the millennia-old trees in the distance. The colossal trunk was sliced cleanly as if it were paper, and the massive tree toppled with a thunderous crash that echoed through the forest. Rigger staggered back, his heart pounding. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he stared at the devastation he'd caused. That was too close. He exhaled deeply, trying to steady his nerves. One mistake, and I could have been killed. He had severely underestimated the level of control required to wield vacuum magic. The precision needed was likely at a molecular level. Determined to avoid such near-death experiences, he resolved to significantly improve his control before attempting any similarly dangerous magic again. Experimentation shouldn't feel like gambling with his life. Returning to his scattered notes, he began mentally cataloging the possibilities and limitations of the magical elements he mastered. He recalled the day he tried channeling the maximum amount of mana into an explosion spell. The flames, normally orange, shifted to yellow and then to a fierce blue, indicating an exponentially higher temperature and destructive potential. The intense heat was still fresh in his memory. If I gain enough control over fire, could I do something like Yamamoto's Bankai? The idea fascinated and terrified him in equal measure. Flames of that magnitude would be devastating to his enemies and himself, if mismanaged. Looking down at the ground, he remembered the saint-level earth magic Colossus Fortress. After mastering its structure, he could rapidly create platforms and reshape them as needed. It revolutionized his battlefield mobility, enabling him to leap, dodge, and craft impromptu structures with ease. Yet he aspired for something greater: control at a molecular level. Water magic, however, left him unsatisfied. While useful for creating ice, it didn't seem as versatile. Maybe if I focus on pressurizing water. He pondered whether he was overlooking something or if the element's limitations were inherent. He hoped that exploring the saint-level water magic his master Verdia mentioned, one that involved rainstorms and lightning, might provide inspiration. Barrier magic was another challenge. While some barriers, like elemental magic barrier and intermediate physical barrier, were practical, most had highly specific purposes, such as sealing or blocking particular forces. Creating a fast, versatile barrier was still beyond his reach. Unfortunately, his lack of talent in the field made casting barrier spells without incantations difficult, though he'd managed the magic barrier through sheer effort. Healing magic, on the other hand, was an area of rapid progress. His current goal was to heal without direct contact, aiming for something akin to continuous regeneration. His initial results were promising. Having reached an advanced level in detoxification magic, he decided to set it aside temporarily to focus on more pressing pursuits. Rigger sighed as his thoughts drifted to his curiosity about summoning and teleportation magic. If only there was someone to teach me. Unfortunately, according to Verdia, these magics seemed to be lost to time. It was something he'd have to uncover on his own if he chose to pursue them. Failing that, he resolved to visit the flying fortress of the armored dragon king someday, home to the greatest summoner. Among the magics he wanted to create, lightning magic was a top priority. Inspired by the storms conjured through saint-level water magic, he planned to use it as a foundation. Additionally, he aimed to refine howling magic. If he could control its intensity and apply it on a larger scale, it might resemble the Conqueror's Haki from One Piece, a technique that intimidated and subdued foes in his vicinity. The idea was clear: turn experiments into practical tools. As he ran through the forest back to the village, Rigger contemplated the possibilities and limitations he faced. His magic was progressing well, both traditional and experimental, but his advancement in his sword techniques worried him. Still, today's accident with vacuum magic served as a stark reminder of how far he had to go. When Rigger arrived at the village, he saw Ghislaine training a group of children and adults in the training field, including Linnea and Persina. Approaching, he called out, "Ghislaine, come with me." Though only 7 years old, Ghislaine displayed unwavering dedication to the Iron Legion. His efforts to train everyone while managing administrative tasks made Rigger consider him his right-hand man, a role Ghislaine seemed thrilled to fulfill. Ghislaine quickly followed, trailing Rigger to a more secluded area. There he began his report. "Taze is nearly at the advanced level. He'll be ready to follow you when you leave." Rigger nodded, satisfied. He was considering establishing an external branch of the Iron Legion, and Taze, who was both talented and mature, seemed like the ideal leader. At almost 11 years old, Taze showed promise, which was why Rigger had asked Ghislaine to monitor his progress closely. Ghislaine continued, detailing the children's and adults' progress. Lysina excelled in water magic, particularly ice, but struggled in close combat. Taze, on the other hand, showed a natural affinity for the North God style practiced by the tribe. However, starting later than others meant his magic proficiency only reached the intermediate level, with his mana reserves being modest. Among the adults, many were learning magic, although they could not use incantation-free casting. But most joined for the unique physical exercises Rigger introduced, courtesy of his grappling expertise from his previous life. Rigger listened intently, analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of each member. "Have you found any solutions for the swords?" he asked after the report. "No. The tribe doesn't have the best blacksmiths, and we certainly don't have a sword capable of withstanding your magical enhancements," Ghislaine replied, disheartened. Rigger glanced at the sword on his waist. "All right, let me know if there's any news." He then dismissed Ghislaine. By late afternoon, Rigger reached Fendral's home. He heard laughter and animated voices as he approached, leaping to the treetop house. Fendrel and Geru were there, seated with full mugs, and to his surprise, his father Hantar was also present. It was rare to see him in moments of relaxation, but here he seemed at ease, chatting casually with the others. "Ah, Rigger!" Fendrel exclaimed as he saw Rigger approaching. "The prodigy of the Doldia tribe decides to bless us with his presence." "Oh, did you muster some courage after drinking, Fendrel?" Rigger replied with a playful smile. He knew it was a joke, but the compliment still made him slightly uncomfortable. "Haha, have you forgotten you can no longer beat him, Fendrel?" Geru said as he finished the rest of his mug. "Come, sit down." Hantar inclined his head in acknowledgement, and Rigger felt the familiar warmth of being among trusted people. He settled onto one of the benches and accepted a mug Fendrel handed him. "So, what brings you here?" Hantar asked, looking directly at Rigger. "It's not every day you join us for moments like these." Rigger hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm struggling," he admitted. "I want to reach the saint level in the sword god style, but I feel like I've hit a wall. The more I train, the more I realize how far I am from it." Hantar smiled, a mix of pride and understanding in his expression. "You're far from it because you're aiming for something great, Rigger. No one reaches the saint level without effort. Even the greatest masters face challenges. But there's no need to rush, Fendrell added, gesturing with his mug. I've seen plenty of warriors, and none of them came close to achieving what you can do at your age. You're the most talented we've ever seen, kid. And that's the problem, Rigger said, letting out a sigh. Everyone expects me to overcome these challenges quickly. I expect it of myself, too. That's the weight of talent, Garo commented, resting his chin on his hand. But let me tell you something, talent isn't everything. Resilience, patience, and the ability to learn from mistakes are just as important. Hantar nodded in agreement. Garo's right. Remember, Rigger, the path to strength isn't a race. It's a journey. You have time. If you keep training, you'll reach the saint level sooner or later. I think the reason for this might be a lack of real danger, Rigger explained. My techniques are improving, but my battle instincts aren't being challenged, which is also why I haven't lost control anymore. Fendrell, a swordsman at the saint level, had lost an arm to an old friend, leaving him without the strength to represent a challenge. That is indeed a problem. Moreover, you don't have a clear example to follow. You've seen the long sword of light, but it would help if I could show you now. At the sword sanctuary, you'd always have stronger opponents to face, Fendrell said. Hanar chimed in. There aren't many beasts that would challenge you unless you used only your sword, but you'd always feel like you could escape easily with magic. The conversation flowed naturally from there, with the three warriors sharing stories and advice. At some point, Garu suggested, you said you exhaust your mana every day, right? Why not go into battle with those beasts after spending your mana? That way, you wouldn't have magic at your disposal. Rigger was surprised. That is actually a great idea, Fendrell added. That could work, but I think you need to train for that type of combat first. You're too used to fighting with your magic. If you fought an A-rank monster without magic now, you'd lose badly, even with your supernatural strength. Hanar offered his perspective. I agree. Besides, if you really want to make this battle your spark, your techniques must be as refined as possible. Garen nodded in agreement. Rigger listened attentively to their advice. But then Fendrell shifted the tone of the conversation to something lighter. Now, changing the subject, are you into your master, kid? Fendrell was already laughing before Rigger could respond. Rigger was caught off guard, surprised by the abrupt change of topic. It's not like that. He tried to steer the conversation away, but Fendrell pressed on relentlessly. Oh, so you're planning to marry one of the two heiresses and become the leader of the tribe? Or maybe both? Hanar rolled his eyes, but a faint smile escaped. Rigger replied more seriously. Actually, I see them as my little sisters or maybe disciples. Then you're not denying Verdia? Fendrell countered, laughing loudly. Rigger realized he'd fallen into a trap. Laughter echoed through the porch, breaking any remaining tension. Even Rigger couldn't help but laugh. Moments like these reminded him that, despite his challenges and responsibilities, he was part of a community that supported him. After a few more stories, the conversation returned to combat-related topics. Rigger, you've been experimenting with magic while training in the sword god style, right? Garu asked. Yes, I've been trying to integrate magic into combat, Rigger replied. It's not easy, but I've had some successes. I need to find ways to do it without losing the advantages of the style. That's something only you can figure out, Fendrell said. No one else is combining magic with sword techniques at your level. It's uncharted territory, but don't let it overwhelm you, Hantar added. You have time. Remember, even the greatest warriors had to learn slowly. Rigger nodded, feeling a bit more relieved. He knew there was still a long road ahead, but he also knew he had the support of those around him. As night fell, they continued talking, alternating between battle stories and lighthearted moments. Rigger left that meeting with a new perspective, determined to follow his path without rushing, but with unwavering determination. Back at his house, Rigger sat at his desk, picking up his notebook again. He reviewed his ideas, adjusted strategies, and made plans for the coming days. Despite his fatigue, he felt clearer about the path he needed to take. Talent without effort is useless. Strength without purpose is waste. Even with his resilience, this night reminded him of one thing. In his past life, he'd worked hard, sacrificing many things for his future, only to die with no one to blame but himself. He decided that even while dedicating himself to training, he would remember what he was trying to achieve. He would remember to enjoy life with the people he sought to protect. And even with his lofty goals, he wouldn't forget his roots, where he came from, and who supported him along the way. As he turned off the light and lay down, Rigger no longer felt the same anxiety that had haunted him before. The day had been long and productive, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 17. In the Eye of the Storm. The dry sound of an impact reverberated through the clearing, followed by the violent displacement of leaves and dust. The force of the strike caused nearby trees to tremble. At the center of the commotion stood Rigger, his expression serious, sword in hand, chest rising and falling rhythmically as he maintained his combat stance. Verdia warriors surrounded him. Facing him stood Hantar, his father, a man whose presence was synonymous with authority. Beside him, two seasoned veterans of the tribe, their scars a testament to countless battles fought. The fourth was a rising young warrior. All of them were advanced-level fighters. Rigger relied solely on his physical strength, sword, instincts, and the techniques he had refined since childhood. No magic. His movements were a seamless blend of the sword god style's aggression, with its swift and lethal strikes, and the adaptability of the North god style, filled with calculated dodges and devastating counterattacks. What truly set him apart, however, was his creativity. Rigger incorporated powerful kicks, acrobatic spins, and unconventional strikes that disrupted the rhythm of his opponents. Hanar was the first to move. His straightforward punch was so powerful that the air itself seemed to vibrate, scattering dust before it even reached its target. Rigger dodged by the narrowest of margins, his movements as fluid and swift as a feline's. His motion stirred dry leaves into swirling eddies, a spectacle that captured the other combatants' attention. Without losing momentum, Hanar attacked with a feint using a North god distraction technique, but Rigger spun on his axis and delivered a powerful sidekick. The blow connected with one of the warrior's torsos, sending him flying backward as if struck by a battering ram. The thunderous impact echoed through the clearing as the warrior slammed into a tree, collapsing to his knees, clutching his broken arm. "Don't stop!" Hantar roared, his voice thunderous. The remaining three advanced in unison, forming a pincer around Rigger. The tension in the air was palpable. Every move seemed meticulously calculated as the seasoned warriors sought to force Rigger into making a mistake. But Rigger was in control. He ducked under a diagonal slash, the blade grazing close enough to sever a few strands of his hair. A blade strike quickly followed, which Rigger blocked with his own sword before countering with a direct punch to his opponent's stomach. The strike was so forceful that the ground cracked under the shockwave, and the warrior collapsed unconscious on impact, rolling dozens of meters before coming to a stop, frothing at the mouth. The next warrior hesitated for a split second, and that was all Rigger needed to seize the offensive. He surged forward with impressive speed, delivering a sequence of sword strikes. Shallow cuts appeared on the warrior as he desperately tried to parry with his blade. Before Hantar could intervene, Rigger disarmed the warrior and stopped his blade after leaving a shallow cut on the opponent's neck. In the end, only Hantar remained standing. Father and son faced each other, both breathing heavily, but neither showing any sign of yielding. "You've improved a lot, son," Hantar said, a predatory grin spreading across his face, a challenge in itself. "Just a little?" Rigger's smile was confident but not arrogant. He knew how strong his father was, and every fight against him pushed him to his limits. Rigger moved first, executing the long sword of silence so quickly that it left a streak in the air. Hanar ducked at the last second, spinning to the side and countering with a sweeping kick. Rigger leaped over it, but Hantar had anticipated the move. Rising fluidly, he unleashed an upward hook punch. Rigger released his sword midair, receiving the blow, but using the momentum to slip inside his father's guard. In a flash, he executed a grappling technique, pinning Hantar to the ground. His claws stopped millimeters from his father's throat. "Yielded. You win." Hantar raised his hand, laughing as he caught his breath. The other warriors, still recovering, watched the scene with smiles of respect and admiration. Rigor extended a hand to help his father up, which Hanar accepted with visible pride in his eyes. You pushed me to my limit today. Thank you, Rigor said, bowing his head in gratitude to the other warriors. You've earned it, kid. It's not every day we see someone so young master techniques at this level, remarked one of the veterans, still massaging his shoulder after taking one of Rigor's blows. Hantar dusted off his clothes and looked at his son with curiosity. And now? Resting, or do you have more plans for the day? Rigor grinned, energized. I'm learning Saint-level wind magic with Master Verdia today. Tornado. Want to watch? Hunter's expression turned intrigued. Of course. That's not something you see every day. As they walked back to the village, the relaxed atmosphere between them was filled with chatter about the approaching rainy season. Oigar should arrive with the water god-style instructor before the rains begin, Hantar commented. I hope he's found someone worthy. If he chose personally, it must be good enough. When they reached home, Rigor managed to convince Celine to join them. His mother accepted with a smile, always willing to support her son's achievements. Rigor led the group through the forest, followed closely by his students and subordinates. Lysena, Killian, Linnea, and Persina, with his master, Verdia, just behind. Hantar, his father, and Celine, his mother, had also decided to come along to witness Rigor's training in saint-level magic. Celine stayed close, her expression full of pride as she watched her son walk confidently. You're growing so fast, my child. It feels like just yesterday you could barely conjure a small fireball, and now, she said, smiling warmly, and now he's dragging us along a trail full of roots and rocks. Linnea grumbled, stumbling as she tried to keep up. Slow down. We're not all machines like you. What's the matter, Linnea? I thought you were stronger than Persina. I don't hear her complaining, Rigor teased, looking over his shoulder with a playful smile. How does your master keep up? She's a mage. Linnea groaned again. Verdia chuckled. I'm also a rather skilled archer. The group continued until they reached a wide clearing, its ground covered with short grass and bathed in intense sunlight. The area was perfect for practicing powerful and potentially dangerous magic. Verdia stepped into the center of the clearing, turning to face the group. Now, I'll demonstrate once. Pay close attention, little Rigor. Wind is your weakest element, so it's okay if you don't get it right away. Rigor crossed his arms, watching her intently. She began chanting the spell, her voice echoing through the clearing, blending harmoniously with the breeze. Oh, ancestral spirits of the winds, who have witnessed ages of glory and destruction, unite in eternal pact and grant me the power of the primordial storm. Let the skies weep in vortexes, and the earth tremble at the furious dance of currents. Tear the heavens, rise in endless spirals, and bring judgment with every twist. Manifest your boundless fury. Tornado. The natural breeze soon turned into strong gusts, lifting leaves and dust into the air. Spirals of wind formed around her, quickly growing in height and intensity. The tornado roared, displacing the air with such force that even Hantar took a step back, shielding Celine with his arm. This is incredible, Celine murmured, awestruck. Indeed, formidable, Hantar agreed, his tone heavy with respect. He could tell that if they were any closer, they'd all have been swept away by the violent gale. Verdia dispelled the magic with a wide gesture, and the clearing returned to silence. This is Tornado, she explained, a saint-level wind magic spell. Controlling such a spell demands more than power. It requires absolute concentration and a focused mind. Verdia turned to Rigor, her eyes filled with expectation. Are you ready to try? I am, Master. Verdia gestured for him to step into the center. Show me what you've learned, Rigor. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes to feel the wind's flow. Years of training flashed through his mind. The repeated attempts to manipulate air for flight spells, his enhancements for high-speed movement techniques like flash step, and his failed attempts at vacuum magic, which, despite not succeeding, still gave him experience. In truth, wind magic was arguably the element he controlled most adeptly. Wind is motion and force, but it's also balance, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. He began to chant, raising his arms slowly. Oh, spirits of the ancestral winds, witnesses of eras of glory and destruction, unite in an eternal pact and grant me the power of the primordial storm. Let the skies weep in vortices, and the earth tremble at the furious dance of the currents. Tear the heavens, rise in eternal spirals, and bring judgment with every rotation. Manifest your endless wrath. Tornado. The air responded immediately, as if eager to heed the call. Currents began forming into gentle but precise spirals. As the tornado took shape, Rigger recalled something he had seen in his past life, a documentary about hurricanes and tornadoes. Tornadoes form from colliding masses of hot and cold air, creating intense rotation. But hurricanes, they require heat and water. A strong central pressure can turn something destructive into something even greater. The idea struck him like lightning. He decided to try. What if I increase the pressure and add more layers? He murmured, his eyes gleaming with renewed determination. Rigger concentrated, adjusting the airflow within the tornado. He began manipulating the outer layers to spin in opposite directions while intensifying the pressure at the core. The tornado started to transform. Its edges widened and became more defined, while the core grew in power and density. Instead of a chaotic whirlwind, what emerged was a miniature hurricane, spinning with such intensity that cracks began forming in the ground below. The roar of the wind became deafening, and nearby trees swayed violently, as if ready to snap. The winds were so fierce that Verdia cast an intermediate barrier spell to block them. Rigger's magic was visibly more powerful than the tornado Verdia had conjured earlier. The tornado lasted several minutes, devastating the land and toppling trees that were tens of meters thick. A distant mountain suffered landslides as the spell raged on. When Rigger finally lowered his arms, releasing the magic, the hurricane dissolved slowly into a wave of wind that swept through the clearing, tousling everyone's hair. Silence fell. Persina was the first to break it. What was that? Linnea shook her head, speechless, while Killian and Lysina stared at Rigger as if they were in the presence of a living legend. Verdia, however, stood still, incredulous. She walked slowly to the center of the clearing, looking at Rigger with a mixture of amazement and fascination. "Where did you learn that?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Rigger scratched his head, slightly flustered by his master's intense gaze. "I don't know. I just did it instinctively." He lied. For a moment, everyone thought Verdia would be furious. But, to everyone's surprise, she began laughing. It wasn't a polite or restrained laugh. It was a deep, joyous, genuine one. "He did that instinctively," she exclaimed between laughs. Everyone was even more shocked. Verdia had never laughed before. Even Hantar, who had known her the longest, stood open-mouthed. Rigger, on the other hand, was mesmerized by her laughter, as if angels were luring him closer. He blushed and looked away. When she finally stopped laughing, she ruffled his hair, her smile radiating pride. "With that magic, you can call yourself a Wind King." "Wind King?" Rigger repeated, confused. "That technique you just used, turning a tornado into a hurricane, it's a king-level spell, something only a handful of magicians in the world can perform. Even among the greatest, it's rare. I myself have mastered this magic, but what you just did..." She shook her head, awestruck. It seemed even stronger. Rigger looked at her, stunned. He hadn't realized he had achieved something so significant. "Am I a king-level magician?" Verdia laughed again. "You can bet on it." The group's light-hearted energy lingered as they returned to the village. However, upon arrival, the mood shifted. A crowd had gathered in the village center. Oigar stood with two humans, an elderly woman with a dignified posture and a teenager with bright, wary eyes. Guise was at the forefront, interrogating them with near-aggressive intensity. Rigger stepped forward, with Celine and Hantar close behind. Their presence was enough to draw the crowd's attention. "Guys, can I handle this?" Guise hesitated visibly, but reluctantly stepped back. Rigger had to admit, the beast folk's philosophy of respecting strength was genuinely useful. The elderly woman stepped forward, bowing her head slightly in a gesture of courtesy. Thank you for intervening. My name is Eleonora, and this is my grandson, Idar. Oigar, who are they? Hanar asked, looking directly at the warrior. Eleonora is an advanced-level swordswoman in the water god style. She offered to become an instructor, but under one condition. We help by her other grandson, who was sold as a slave. Eleonora's sharp gaze fell on Rigor, narrowing slightly. Oigar said your leader was very strong. But you're just a child? Before anyone could respond, Idar spoke up. If you're so strong, prove it. The clearing fell silent. Idar, about 13 or 14 years old, with sun-kissed blonde hair and wheat-colored eyes, radiated arrogance. Rigor smiled, crossing his arms. After a moment, Rigor turned to Taze, who had been watching silently. Taze, Rigor called, his voice calm but firm. Fight him. The young beast folk, with reddish-brown hair and golden eyes, stepped forward, dropping his casual demeanor. He smiled slightly as he unsheathed his sword. It would be an honor, Chief. Idar frowned, confused. You're sending someone else to fight for you? Rigor's gaze sharpened as he replied. You seem to misunderstand something here. No one is obligated to accept your challenge. This is merely my whim, as I wish to test my subordinate. His tone grew more serious, releasing a faint bloodlust. Idar flinched, his arrogance faltering slightly. Eleonora intervened. Very well. Let them fight. There's no need for further tension. Rigor nodded, stepping back to observe. The two young warriors positioned themselves in the center of the clearing, swords in hand. Taze took a stance from the North God style, his feet planted firmly, breathing steady. Idar adopted the fluid posture of the water god style, his movements almost like a dance as he awaited Taze's first move. What followed was an intense duel that left everyone astonished. As soon as the fight began, it was clear that neither of them was weak. Taze moved swiftly, his strikes slicing through the air unpredictably. Idar, however, maintained a solid stance, blocking the attacks with precision. The clash seemed balanced at first, but Idar soon began utilizing the flow of the water god style to put pressure on Taze, forcing him to retreat. Each counterattack deepened Taze's disadvantage. Idar was likely an advanced-level practitioner of the water god style. That's when Taze revealed his true strength. Without warning, he conjured sharp earthen pillars beneath Idar's feet. Idar reacted quickly, leaping backward, but the attack pierced his foot, throwing him off balance. He recovered almost immediately, but there was no time to counterattack. The pillars had obscured his view of Taze, and when he searched for him again, a flaming blade was already mere meters away. He hastily used the flow technique to cut through the magic, but the resulting explosion still burned him and pushed him slightly back. Silent casting? Idar murmured, shocked. He had no time to process this further, as a blade was suddenly placed against his throat. Is that all? Taze asked with a grin. How did you do that? Taze sheathed his sword. Trade secret. Rigor praised him. Well done, Taze. Once you reach the advanced level, you'll be even deadlier. Thanks for the opportunity, boss. He then turned to Eleonora. Now, let's discuss the terms more thoroughly. With that, the tension in the clearing began to ease. Taze received congratulations from his companions, while Idar seemed more inclined to listen and observe. Rigor had noticed several things about the water god style that interested him. Its counters, its ability to cut through magic, definitely techniques worth incorporating. Chapter 18. Preparations for Departure. The rains had finally arrived in the Great Forest. The sky remained gray and dense, with clouds so heavy they seemed only a few meters above the treetops. The constant sound of water dripping from the trees and rooftops was hypnotic. Trails that were once solid had turned into rivers, but this was customary. Their system of bridges and elevated pathways had endured many rainy seasons before. Inside his home atop a tree, sheltered from the storm, Rigor sat before Verdia, his mentor. The room, illuminated by torches, exuded the tranquility of a safe haven in contrast to the chaos outside. Verdia was explaining the theoretical complexity of cumulonimbus, a saint-level water spell capable of creating colossal storms. This was part of the final segment of the curriculum she had prepared for him. Her last lessons covered king-level earth magic, saint-level water magic, advanced barrier magic, and an introduction to magic circles. Additionally, she was teaching him the demon god language, as Rigger planned to visit the demon continent someday. Pay close attention. This spell isn't just a powerful conjuration, it's a balance of forces. You manipulate air and water, creating a dynamic system that can spiral out of control if the balance is lost, she explained. Rigger listened attentively, committing every word to memory. In the next room, his mother, Celine, was training intensively with Eleonora. Rigger could hear the rhythmic sound of wooden swords clashing, interspersed with the deep voice of the elderly instructor of the water god style. Celine had practiced the water god style during her time as a slave to protect her masters, but she had only reached the elementary level. Now, she had decided to see if she could achieve the intermediate level. Rigger glanced at the doorway, observing the scene. Eleonora's posture was rigid, her movements precise despite her advanced age. Her facial scars and the severity in her gaze told stories that few dared to ask about. Mealy's, Rigger thought, recalling the story he had heard when she was officially hired. Eleonora had lost her children to slave traders, and her grandchildren had been sold to a noble of Mealy's. Upon learning this, Eleonora had gathered all her savings and approached the noble to buy back her grandchildren. The noble agreed, and when she felt relief, he returned only one grandchild, claiming they had only agreed on the price for one. He then demanded the same price to buy the other. The hypocrisy of that nation, which prided itself as a bastion of justice, was infuriating. She used everything she had to save them and was still deceived, Rigger reflected, feeling a mix of anger and sympathy. Eleonora was in the tribe because she had made a deal: train the warriors until one reached the advanced level in exchange for financial support to rescue her other grandchild. Her story seems true, but it never hurts to be cautious. Redirecting his attention to Verdia, Rigger mused, "My impression of that nation worsens each day. The noble pursuing my master's life won't last much longer either. I believe I'll leave the great forest by next year." Between moments of study, magical practice, and physical training, Rigger reflected on his progress. He was learning the water god style with Eleonora, and although she considered him very talented, he wasn't as gifted as he was in the sword god style. In the North god style, he was competent but not exceptional. Even so, he valued the learning process. Each technique, each style, each fragment of knowledge was a piece he intended to combine in the future, creating something unique. However, he knew this idea of forging his own style would have to wait until he fully understood the use of Tuki, a skill still beyond his grasp. One step at a time, he reminded himself, turning back to Verdia and her explanations about magic. "Master, are there any living mages at the god levels?" "God-level mages?" Verdia paused, thinking for a moment. "Yes. Are there any currently?" "To my knowledge, the armored dragon king Perugius Dola and the demon god Laplace, who is sealed but alive, were the last confirmed god-level mages. Perhaps the dragon god or the technique god are at that level, but I've never seen them in person, nor do I know who they are. Some say there are ancient demons hidden away who might have reached that level, but I can't confirm the truth of such claims." Rigger absorbed the information. Although far from reaching such a grandiose level, he felt a growing urge to push his limits. Later, Rigger participated in a hunt organized by the tribe's warriors and the Iron Legion. The floods caused by the rains had brought aquatic crocodiles close to the tribes, posing a threat to the residents. Hunts like this were common during this season and also served as an opportunity for Rigger to train his combat-based magical skills. Combining strength and speed, Rigger stood out in confronting the creatures. His mind, however, remained focused on something greater: the future. He planned to leave the Great Forest once he reached the Saint level in swordsmanship and mastered King-level earth magic and Saint-level water magic. When the time came, he intended to take about 30 members of the tribe to establish an Iron Legion base outside the Great Forest, with Taze as the group leader. This will be a good start, he thought, watching the crocodile corpses being swept away by the current. To prepare for this, Rigor had begun teaching Killian about leadership and what it meant to bear the responsibility of guiding others. He planned for Killian to assume leadership early on after his departure. Despite being just a child, Killian could already use advanced wind and earth magic, earning some respect. Rigor had also decided to restrict teaching magic to only the tribe members who showed great potential and loyalty. The more he learned about magic, the more Rigor realized its destructive potential. Even in his current state, he believed he could wipe out a large portion of the Great Forest if he poured all his mana into a hurricane spell. This knowledge, if wielded by the wrong hands, could be catastrophic, he reflected. It's better to be selective and cautious. Recently, Rigor had also been dealing with a growing restlessness. The tribe's mating season was beginning, and he noticed changes in his instincts. At times, his thoughts wandered while observing the women of the tribe, which deeply troubled him. Not because he was opposed to acting on such thoughts, but because he feared losing control and forcing someone against their will. I'm barely 8 years old. What will happen when I'm older? The thought alarmed him, further solidifying his resolve to leave the village as soon as possible. I need to reach Saint level before that happens. After the rainy season, I'll put Geru's suggestion into practice, facing an A-rank beast without using magic. I'm ready. I've already chosen my opponent. 23. The sound of rain was muffled by the wooden walls. We need to prepare to establish the Iron Legion's headquarters outside the Great Forest. Taze, you'll lead the initial group. It will consist of about 30 warriors, and I will personally select them. Taze looked at him with determination. And where will we go? To a city just before Meles' capital, Tinevur. We need a location that's strategic but safe enough to establish the base. For now, focus on picking the right people. Meanwhile, Rigor began instructing Killian on leadership and strategy. It's not just about strength, Killian. Leadership means understanding people and ensuring that every decision benefits the group. This is even more important when you possess knowledge others don't. Killian nodded, though his expression was serious. Do you really think teaching magic is such a big risk? Rigor sighed. Yes. For now, I trust teaching magic only to members of the tribe. Even then, I'm extremely selective. This power cannot fall into the wrong hands. Killian seemed to reflect on Rigor's words as he continued explaining how to balance responsibility and trust. Elsewhere in the village, a meeting was taking place. Gustav, the tribe's chief, was accompanied by guys and 2 other experienced warriors. On the opposing side were Celine, Hantar, Verdia, and Geru. Rigor's absence was notable but intentional. He was training with Fendrel at the time. Guys was the first to speak, his voice firm. Rigor is strong, perhaps the most promising our tribe has ever seen. He shouldn't leave the village. His strength is vital to protecting our people. Celine immediately retorted. Guys, this is ridiculous. We've never stopped our warriors from exploring the world. Why should it be any different with him? Because he is different, one of the other warriors exclaimed. We've never had someone with such potential. If something happens to him out there, it will be a loss for all of us. Hantar, Rigor's father, intervened, his voice calm yet firm. If we keep him confined here, we'll be killing that potential. He needs to grow, explore, and learn. Our tribe cannot be his limit. Frankly, he would have left already if it weren't for Verdia and Fendrel being here. Verdia remained silent, observing the exchange, while Geru crossed his arms and finally spoke. I agree with Celine and Hantar. We can't keep Rigor here. He's already proven his responsibility and vision. To confine someone like him to the village would be a waste. The debate continued, with both sides intensifying their arguments. While Guys and his allies emphasized the importance of keeping Rigor as a deterrent and safety measure, Celine and Hantar argued that Rigor deserved to choose his own path, and that his departure would bring long-term benefits. Finally, Gustav raised his hand, calling for silence. I understand both sides, but in the end, the decision must be Rigor's. He's young, but he has shown enough maturity and strength to make his own choices. Let us respect that. The room fell silent for a few moments before everyone reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Rigor, unaware of the ongoing discussion, was training intensively with Fendrel. Amidst strikes and dodges, His thoughts wandered to the preparations he still needed to make. He knew leaving the village would not only be a personal milestone, but also an emotional break from everything he had ever known. I'm still not strong enough, he thought. But that's only a matter of time. Weeks passed, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. The tribe remained busy during this season, with constant movement as everyone dealt with the challenges brought by the relentless downpour. Amidst the bustling activity, Rigger focused intently on his plans.